So when a user wants to upload something in our chat here, what we can do is when we click this attach icon, we want a model to appear similar to this model here where we have all of the contacts, and we have already created a reusable model. So what we now need to do is when we click here, open a new model, and then in there we want to upload a file to Firestore Storage. So let's go ahead and configure that first of all. So in our Cloud Firestore, we have our chats and our users collections, so that's working fine. If we go into the build drop down in here, we have this one, which is storage, which we need to set up. So all we do is click get started in here, and we just want to start in test mode for now. And then we've already selected our location, so all we do is click done. So now that is creating a default bucket for us. So this is where we can store all of our storage files. So in our case, we will have only images that we want to upload in this chat. So whilst that's being set up, what I want to do is go into our application in here, and then where we have the sidebar header in the common components in here, click sidebar header and index in there. We are rendering an app model component, so I'm just going to copy this, and where we want to access the files is in the attach icon here. So what we want to do is go into the message input component, which is in the main screen section, and where we have the attach file icon, what I want to do is paste in the app model component, and instead of the chat outline icon, we just want the attach file icon in here, and we just need to import the app model component as well. And what I want to change the title is to upload image, and then the model type is going to be either of type chat, or if we go into icon model type, so if we go into the app model icon model type, and then that could be either upload or chat. So we want to have the type as upload, because then what will happen is that will render a different component. So in app model now, if I open this up and we scroll down, we have a function that handles the model children. So if we go into this function, and then if the case of model type is upload, it will render the upload model. So let's go into the upload model now. And here you can see it says this is the upload model. So now all I need to do is save all. And if I go back into my browser, we have the chat model, which handles the contacts in here. But now we have the upload model, which handles the upload image. This is the upload model. And we have duplicated the icon. So let's remove the other icon in message input, which is this one. So now if I save, I don't need the message input anymore. So I can close this one down, and I can also close this helper down as well, because we are rendering this is the upload model, and this is what we need to focus on for now. So we need to configure some UI in here, but essentially what we are going to be using is Material UI to render the items in here. But first of all, what we want to have is a piece of state. So piece of state is essentially the file that we want. So const file and set file, which is equal to use state, and it's null initially. So the file is going to be of type file, which is essentially a file type that we have coming from JavaScript. And then we want an outer div. So the outer div will have a class name, and in this outer div we will have a margin top of 4. It will be flex, and then flex of column. So display flex, flex direction column, and a gap or 2 between the items. Then we want an inner div, and this div will have a class name also. And in this class name, we will have display of flex once again, items of center, and then we also want a gap of 2 in here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to render a Material UI button. So in this div, we have the button coming from Material UI, like so. And in this button, we're going to have the text of upload. And now if I save, we just need to check the model, and I'm going to delete this as well. So now when I click on here, we have a model appear here saying upload. So what I want to do, when I click here, I want the upload model to appear. So let's configure that now. What I also want to do is add a submit button in as well. So I'm just going to copy this, paste this underneath, but the variant this time is going to be contained, and this time it will be submit. So this button is an upload and this one is a submit. So with the upload, essentially what we are doing is we're going to set the file to whatever we upload as the image, and then the button is going to submit this information to the Firestore storage. So if I save this, the first thing I want to do in the button is have an input inside, and this input is going to be of type file. and this input is going to be hidden. So you can have an option of hidden on the input, and it will accept any type of image. So image slash, and then you put an asterisk or star at the end. And I'm going to put in multiple, so you can have the option, and that should be fine. What we also need to do is update the state. So this is the state we have here. We need to update the state when the input changes. So when it accepts an image. So after multiple, what I want to do is have an on change event in here. And this is going to be an event. So first of all, we're going to have the E, which is the event. And in the event, we're going to do a few checks in here. First one is going to be a guard clause. So if there is e.target.files is equal to null. So if e.target.files is triple equal to null, then we just want to return. Otherwise, what I want to do is set the file to e.target.files, and we want the first index in here like so. So initially the file is null. When we upload an image, then it will on change, and then we will set the file to whatever it is in e.target.files of the first index. So now let me just save that so it formats it a little bit better. That is the upload section complete. What I also want to do is after the button is render some UI. So the UI is going to be if file is not equal to null, and that is true, then I want to show a span. And in that span, I want to get access to the file.name. So this is the name of the file that I am uploading. That's the first thing I want to do. And then I want to add a close icon as well underneath, which essentially is icon coming from Material UI. So I'm just going to implement that at the top. So therefore, we need to have this component as a use client now. So the close icon is being imported in, and this is now a React fragment. We need to put this in because we have two children. We can only have one. So essentially, this close icon has some styling to it. But when we click on it, it sets the file back to null. And then we need to handle the else statement, which is otherwise return null. So now, if I save, I want to check what the model shows. And I also want to console what the file is. So let me console log file just to see if we are updating everything and if the functionality we have implemented here is correct. So now we have file as null. So when I click upload, just do this React one, press open. So now we have a file being added to the state of file, as you can see here, and we are setting the name as the file.name. If I press close, what happens is it sets it back to null. So that is all working correctly. Now what we need to do is when we press submit, we need to send this information to our Firestore storage over here. So let's go ahead and do that. So what I'm going to do with this button here is I'm going to set it to disabled if the file is equal to null. So we can't submit anything if the file is equal to null. And that is the file state is equal to null. And then I also want to have an on click on this button, which essentially handles the submitting of the information and the storage. So in here, we're going to have a callback, and I'm going to pass in a function called handle upload. So we need to create this function now. So this function, I'm going to handle this in a storage file. So that is going to be in the lib folder in Firebase. So let's create that now. But first, what I'm going to do is pass in a few arguments in here that we will need for this handle upload, which is the params.id, the set file, which is the setter here, because we need to reset it back to null again. We want the handle close because we want to close the modal. And we also need the file because when we submit something, we need the file information, and then also the URL, so the params ID. So at the top here, we need to get access to the params again. So const params is equal to use params, and we need to import that in as well. So now what I need to do is in Firebase, I'm going to create all of my storage helpers. So I'm going to create a new file in here called storage.ts. And in here, I'm going to create the function. So it's export const handle upload, which essentially is a async function. And then we have our arguments, and I've already predefined the type. So just paste them in here and save. So essentially we get params ID, which is a string, set file, which is a dispatch set state action of file or null, handle close, which closes the modal, and then file, which is equal to file or null. So in here now, what I'm going to do is, because it's an async function, I'm going to do a try catch block. So try, and then after here, we want to do a catch. And then also we want to do a finally, because this finally block will happen every time, no matter what the outcome. So we want to do that. And first of all, what we want to do is finally we want to set file to null and handle close always. So that's very important. What I also want to do in my try block is do a few console logs. So first one is uploading, got it here. Second one I want to do is console log the file because I want to know if the file is coming through. Third one, I don't need to do a console log, but I need to do some defensive programming, which means we do a guard close. So if there's no file, then we want to return, so don't do anything. Otherwise, we want to do await upload image, which takes in two arguments, which is the file and also the params ID. So I need to create this function now, which is essentially handling the upload of the image. So that section is complete. And then all we need to do is for the catch, handle the error. So console.error of error message like so. So just before the handle upload, I'm going to create a new function. So export const upload image. And this is where we need to take in the file and the params ID. And this function is essentially handling the image upload in each single step. So the first step, what we want to do is we want to format a date for the image name. So let's create that. So const formatted date is equal to the format date, which is the function that I created earlier using TypeScript overload of new date. So we've got the formatted date, and then we want to get the file name, so the name as it appears on the storage bucket. So const file name is equal to, and I'm just going to bring in the name that I want to call it as. So essentially, it's going to be the params ID / the formatted date here .jpeg, or you could call it .png or whatever you wish. Then I'm going to console log the file name. Essentially, the file name is a pointer to the file in the storage bucket in the cloud, and it's also lightweight as well. It says it in the Firebase docs. So that is that step done. Now we need to have the storage ref, so get reference to the storage ref. So const storage ref is equal to ref, which essentially is from Firebase v9, and inside we have the storage and the file name. So the storage we need to define now. So let's go ahead in our index file in Firebase here, and we want to do const storage is equal to get storage. So now we have synced that part up. We need to import this get storage now from Firebase Storage. So I'll just import this at the top. And then all I need to do is export this. So this is the benefit of using Firebase, is you can add and replace functionality wherever you want. And then you have a central point where you can use the enhancements or services or whatever it is you need. So in here now, all I need to do is import storage from the index file. And I also need to import ref from Firebase Storage. So now we have access to the storage ref. I can also console log the storage ref if I need to. But what I now need to do is upload the file to the storage bucket. So I'm just going to add that in as a comment. And now all I need to do is await upload bytes, which comes from Firebase Storage, passing in the storage ref and also the file, which is coming from here. And then once that is done, we can then chain a dot then onto this upload bytes with a snapshot. And then we can also console log whatever we've uploaded. So uploaded a global file with the snapshot. And then finally, what I also want to do is just simply return the file name if I need it for anything. So that's that section complete. And then now this upload image function is handled up here, which essentially handles all of the functionality for the uploading of the image. So if I go back into upload modal and I need to do control space and import this in, that is the upload of the image complete. So now what we need to do is test this out to see if it uploads into the storage bucket. So in our application, again, what I'm going to do is upload an image. So upload, then we can select our image that we want and press open. It's saying the name that I need in here. And then now what I want to do is press submit. But first of all, when I press it, all of the console logs that we have made, they should log out here in the console. So if I press submit, as you can see, we have logged the console saying uploading started, the file that we are uploading. We've got the file name now. And then finally, we've successfully uploaded the global file. And this is the metadata which is being sent to the storage bucket in Firestore Storage. And as you can see here, we have a full path of the image we have in here. So now all we need to do is verify that it worked. So if I go into my cloud Firestore, and in here, we should see an image populate. So if I go into rules and then back into files, as you can see, this document has been created for the storage reference, which is essentially ending in CB. So this is relevant to this chat in here. This is where I've added it. So all I now need to do is if I click into it and I click on the image has now been uploaded and we have all the metadata in here. So what I'm going to do next is fetch this image or all of the images in the application and then render them on the client side onto our chat component in here. Okay, so now that we've uploaded the images, what we now need to do is download them. So in here, we have one image that we have uploaded and we would just want to download it into our components or the message body component. So in our code, what I want to do is if I go into the message body, we are rendering the messages in here. So what we could do is either add the image into the messages array in here and then combine the data and do it that way, or we could just create a separate images component underneath. So what I'm going to do here is create the download images component. So if I call this images, and then what you can do is you can combine them and then sort them into your own array of data. But for now, I'll just keep it as simple as possible. So images, and then if I go into the main screen, I'm going to create a new file in here called images.tsx. So what I actually will do is call it storage images, just to make sure it doesn't confuse anyone. And then RAFCE in here, and this is going to be a React functional component. And what I'm going to do is just render, this is where we render images, and all I want to do now is import this in the message body here. So control space and storage images is in there, and now all I need to do is save all, and in our application you can see this is where we render images like so. So that's fine. What I also want to do now is start creating the functionality for this. So let's go into our storage image component, which is in here, and I'm going to create a few functions. So you could either create these functions in the storage file, so in the lib Firebase storage, or you could create them in here. It's up to you. What I'm going to do is add them in the lib Firebase storage file, and this is also going to be a use client component because we will be using use effect in here. So I'm just going to bring in the use effect, which essentially is to handle the data or the images in our case, and we also need to create this function. So const handle data is just going to be an empty function for now, like so. So now if I save, I just need to import use effect from React, and then the handle data is going to be the function name. So now that should all be fine and working correctly. And what I want to do with handle data is I want to make this an async function because we are going to be awaiting some data coming back when we fetch the data. So let's delete this console log, and I'm going to do await, and the function name is going to be called fetch images, and that is going to be defined in our storage file. So fetch images, essentially I'm going to pass in a few arguments that we need to create. So first argument is going to be something called a list ref. Second one is going to be set images, and then the third one is going to be some data. And fetch images is going to take in two arguments. First one is going to be something called a list ref, and then the second argument is going to be set images, like so. So we need to create the use state for set images, which I will do just before here, and we also need to import the use state, and also the image type we need to define. So I'm just going to define that in types.d.ts, and essentially the images type is a photo URL created at type of string, and then also the message sender ID because we need that. So let me just import that in, and then handle data says makes the dependencies of the use effect hook, move it inside the use effect, or wrap it in its own use callback. So what we'll do is wrap it in its own use callback hook. So this memoizes the function and only re-renders the function when the dependencies change. So in our case, it will be the list ref, but we've not defined it yet, so we don't know what that is. And we also don't know what the fetch images is. So what the list ref is a storage reference in our storage bucket. So let's create that now. So the list ref is the ref coming from Firebase Storage, like so. And what I want to do is get access to our storage and then the param.id. So when we go into our storage bucket, this param ID here is essentially what we want to use, and this is what we use to create the file name. So it's the same folder structure in here. So going back into the code, we want to import storage from our lib Firebase here, and then we also want to get access to the params ID. So let me just again get access to params is equal to use params, which is being used quite a lot in this build because everything is reliant on the params. And then the second argument is a string of params.id in here. So that is the list ref complete, and then we also need to import the use callback. And now if I save, the only thing missing now is the fetch images function. So we need to define this function, and I'll do that in the storage. So let's navigate to there now and scroll all the way to the bottom, and I'm going to create the function. So export const of fetch images. So this one is an async function, and it takes in the list ref, which is a storage reference, and the set images, which is a React state hook. So let me just import storage reference and also the image type in here, and then we also need to close this off. And now we have our function defined. We need to do some checks in this function now. So what we want to do is find all of the items in the storage bucket. So find all of prefix and items, or you could do find all items. You essentially get access to the prefixes and the item, but what we want to do is get access to the items. So now, because this is an async function, what we want to do is there's a hook from Firebase Storage which is called list all. So we want to await and we want to list all. We need to import this from Firebase, which takes in an argument of the reference or the storage reference. So in our case, that's the list ref, and then then we get a response. And in that response, what we get back is a response.items. But I want to essentially create an images array constant also. So let's create that first of all. So in here, what I want to do is const of images array. So this is where I want to add all of the images into, is equal to images type. And at the minute it's an empty array, so we'll just keep it as that for now. And then what we want to do is get access to all of the items in the response. So res.items for each, and in here what I want to do is get access to all of the items on the list ref, which is correct. So if we just delete this, and what we want to do now is create an image URL. So this is where we need to have a new function called get download URL. So this is going to be called const image URL. So what essentially we have done is we have mapped through all of the items, which what I will actually do is console log this first of all. And the item ref in here essentially is going to be a type of storage reference. So item ref will be storage reference, and that comes from Firebase Storage. And we also need to close this off here. So that is all fine. And let me just quickly save this, and we need to handle the fetch images. So let's console log the item ref in here. So at the minute, we should only just get the one image that is saved in our storage bucket. But if there was more, then they would fetch the multiple in there. So let's go and see our console, and we just need to refresh the page as well. So we are getting some errors saying fetch images is not defined. So we need to go into our storage images and import this in, and then we can test it out. So now, as you can see, the item ref is a storage reference in our storage from Firebase. And in here, we have access to a full path. We have the name, which essentially is the name that we give the item. So the name is, we are extracting the last part of the name out. So 1148.jpg, which is essentially the same name in here. So 1148.jpg. And that's the item ref being received as an object. So we just need to render that out. But if we just finish off fetching the image, so fetch images, at the minute, we're just getting the name, but we need the download URL, the full URL path. So let's go ahead and do that now. So in here, put a comment saying get the download URL, which is the full URL path, the image. And then what I'm going to do is underneath create a constant called image URL is equal to await. So essentially we need to put this in an async here, and then await of get storage download URL. So this is the name I'm calling my function, because Firebase has its own function called get download URL, which is what we actually need. So get storage download URL in here, and what we pass in here is the item ref. So now what we need to do is define the get storage down URL as a function. So let's go ahead and do that. So export const, and we do that before, because we are using arrow functions, we need to declare it before, because we don't have the hoisting capability of a normal function. So if you did export function with the name, then it hoists up to the top levels, therefore it's accessible within the fetch images function, but I'm just declaring it before because I prefer the arrow function. So what we need to do now is create this function. So if we copy this, get export const get storage download URL, and this takes in a file name as the argument. And what I will actually do is create this as a normal function. So export async function, just to show you the variety actually. Get storage download URL, which takes in a file name, or you could call it a storage ref. And then the URL essentially is the get download URL, and we need to import this from Firebase. So I'll just import this in at the top. So it's get download URL from Firebase Storage, and we are using that here. And what we also need to do is await get download URL and pass in the file name as the argument in here. And then that's uploaded at the top, and then we just return the URL here. So now we have the image URL. If I just console log the image URL this time to see if we're receiving that. So let's delete this one now and save. Now we should be getting the full URL path of the image URL. So if we refresh the page, so now as you can see, we have the full image URL in here being rendered equal to the image URL. So let's just check if that's actually working. So we can actually click on it, and it opens up the image that we have in our Firestore storage. So if we go into here, that is the exact same image that we have being rendered in our storage here in our bucket. So now what we need to do is just render it out, but let's finish the function first of all. So we have access to the image URL. That's the first step. So now I want to create an object called images data. So let's just bring that in, and I'm going to remove this console log. So images data is going to be this object that has a photo URL, a created at, a type which is equal to storage, a message sender ID which is whoever is sending it, so it'll be the current user. So let's get access to auth.currentuser.uid, and then the photo URL is essentially the image URL that we have defined here. The created at is the name that we looked at earlier on, and we're just splitting it so that we get everything before the full stop, so not the .jpeg, just the name itself and the time. And then the type is storage here. So now what I want to do is I want to add the images array here and push the images data into the images array like so. And then finally, we're getting access to these set images. So we just need to update that to the images array in here. So now that is all complete. What I now want to do is go back into my storage images.tsx file. In here, we just want to console log the images. So let's go ahead and do that. See the image being returned, and it should be an object that is included within an array. So let's save all. And now, as you can see here, the images are being rendered in the component here. So we have an array that contains objects of images, and there's a lot of re-rendering happening in here. So let's just fix that as well. So the re-rendering is happening all the time. So what I'm going to do is delete this because we don't need the handle data being rerun whenever it changes. We only need to handle the data when this component re-renders, so this storage image re-renders. So now all I can do is disable this. So quickly disable this, and then now if I save, this should now fix the issue. So now when I type in a new message saying hey, as you can see, the image gets fetched again, and that updates as well. So that is the images being rendered. So now the only thing left to do is render the image onto the page. So we can just copy the message component UI. So if we go into here, essentially what we can do is copy the divs, which essentially what it is. So copy the div in here and go into our return block and just render the div first of all. And we need to map through the images as well. So images.map for each item in the image, we want to implicitly return the div. So let's move this div up in here like so. And instead of the p tag, what we want to do is we want to have the image be rendered inside. So let's go ahead and do that, which is essentially a div inside, and the div contains an image from next image. And for each item in here, the source is going to be the item.photo URL. So now all I need to do is access the param ID once more on this page. So it'll be params.id. So this is determining whether the styling of the image is on the left or the right side of the page. So if I now save, we now have slight issues that we need to fix. So let's go ahead and fix them. So in our return block, what we want to do is have a surrounding React fragment around everything in here before we map over it like so. So now if I save, that should fix everything here. And now one final thing to do is we need to just check to see if the image is being rendered onto the page. So let's go ahead and do that. So instead of this is where we render the images, now what will happen is the image should render. So now this is a good sign, because what's happening is we're using the next image component, and now we need to update the host name in our next config.js file. So let's go ahead and do that. So in our next config.js, just add another URL of firebase storage.googleapis.com, which means that we're getting an image from Firebase Storage. So when we make a change to our next config, we need to restart the server again. And now all we do is refresh the page. And now, as you can see, we have our image being rendered onto the page as well. So now what you can do is you can combine both components that we have in our message body. So that is the messages and storage images, and you can combine them into one component, and therefore combining the data sets for the data in the data list, i.e. all of the messages, and the storage images, so the images array as well, putting it into one data array, and then you can kind of sort it by the timestamp or the created at, which is what we have created. But anyway, that is everything complete in this application. We have covered quite a lot. So we have covered Firebase login and authentication. We have covered Next.js 13. We have managed to create our Firestore database, and along with the Firestore storage as well, all using Tailwind UI and many other features that we have gone through in this application, along with TypeScript as well. I hope you enjoyed this build. I also have ebooks available on my website that I have created. There are 3 at the minute that I have that hopefully will help you improve and become a better front-end developer in general. I cover a range of topics in them ebooks, and there's more information on my website, and the link is below. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this build and learnt a lot from it, or at least something from it, and please like and subscribe, and I will look forward to seeing you in the next one.